Welcome to the Varia Training Academy. In today's video, we're going to show you how to complete the pre-trip inspection so you can pass your CDL test in the state of Wisconsin. So the first thing we're going to cover is Section A. That covers the front of the tractor, the passenger side of the engine compartment, and the driver's side of the engine compartment. So first thing I want to do is look at the overall condition. I'm looking to make sure there's no signs of damage, no signs of leaks underneath, making sure the tractor is sitting straight and level. If it was not sitting straight and level, it could be an indication of a tire issue or a suspension issue. Next, I'm going to go into the individual components. At the top of the tractor, I've got my clearance lights. They're properly mounted, not damaged, clean amber colored lenses, reflective and functional. Got my hood, my grille, and my bumper are properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my license plate, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's clean, current, and legible. I've got my headlights, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, clear colored lenses, reflective and functional. That's it for the front of the tractor. Now we're going to go on to the side of the engine compartment. All right, so now that we're on the passenger side of the engine compartment, first thing I want to do is I want to look at the overall condition, make sure there's no signs of damage or leaks. Once I've done that, then I'm going to go into the individual components. At the top of the engine, I've got my air cleaner. It's properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my turbocharger and my exhaust coming off of the back of the turbocharger. They're properly mounted, not damaged. There's no signs of leaks, which would be soot at the joints and unions. I've got my alternator, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My alternator is belt driven. The belt is properly mounted, not damaged, with no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. There's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play. And I've got my alternator electrical lines on the back of the alternator here. They're properly mounted, not damaged, with no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. That's it for this side of the engine compartment. Now we're going to go to the other side of the engine compartment. All right, so now we're on the driver's side of the engine compartment. First thing I want to do is look at the overall condition. I'm looking for signs of damage. I'm looking for signs of leaks. I don't see any, so now we're going to go into the individual components. I've got my coolant reservoir, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. The fluid is between the minimum and the maximum. I've got my water pump, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. My water pump is belt driven. My belt is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, abrasions, and there's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play. I've got my oil dipstick, which is properly mounted, not damaged. The oil is between the minimum and the maximum lines on the dipstick. If it was below the minimum, I would add 1 gallon of oil to my filler tube up here, and I would recheck it. I've got my air compressor, which is between the engine and the frame. It is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking, and it is gear driven. My power steering fluid reservoir is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. It's between the minimum and the maximum. My power steering pump is properly mounted, not damaged. It's between the engine and the frame at the back of the engine. It is also gear driven, and it's not leaking. Next, I'm going to look at my hoses throughout the engine compartment. They're properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions in them. My electrical throughout the engine compartment is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. Next, I'm going to go into my suspension components. So my suspension components consist of my spring hangers, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My springs, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My U-bolts, which are properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my shock absorber, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. It is oil filled. Next, I'm going to go into my steering components. All of my steering components are held together at the joints with a castle nut and a cotter key. They consist of the following. I've got my steering shaft, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My steering gearbox, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My pitman arm, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My drag link, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My upper steering arm, which is properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my lower steering arm, which is properly mounted, not damaged, and my tie rod end, which is properly mounted, not damaged. So next I'm going to go into my braking components. I've got my brake hose, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. There's no cuts, cracks, abrasions. I've got my brake chamber, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. This truck has disc brakes, so I'm taking a look to make sure my disc is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cracks in it. My brake pad linings are properly mounted, not damaged. On this truck, I cannot see the brake pad linings, but I know that I need to have at least 1/4 inch of pad remaining, and it's something that I can inquire about when I get my truck serviced. My axle seal is in here. It's properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. A sign of a leak would be oil on my brake components, including my disc and linings. Got my tire, which is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, abrasions, or bulges in the sidewall. I've got at least 4/32 of tread in all major grooves, and I've got even wear across the face of the tire. My tire is inflated to the manufacturer's specification as listed on the tire, which can be located right here. And that can be checked at the valve stem with a tire gauge. My rim is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. I've got my lug nuts, which are all present. They're properly mounted, not damaged. And there's no sign of a loose lug nut, which would be rust streaking from behind the lug nut or shiny metal on the threads of the lug itself. I've got my hub oil seal, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. The sign of a leak would be oil at the base of the rim or oil streaking across the face of the rim. So now that we're done with section A, I want to talk about the difference between drum brakes and disc brakes on your steer axles. Where this truck has drum brakes, our brake chamber is going to be in a different orientation. We've got a slack adjuster push rod coming out of your brake chamber, as well as a slack adjuster mechanism. We want to make sure that we've got no more than 1 inch of free play between the slack adjuster and the slack adjuster push rod. On drum brakes, you can also see the drum and your brake pads. Your brake pads, you need to have at least a 1/4 inch of pad remaining, and it's pretty easy to see on this truck. So now we're going to go on to section B, which includes the side of the tractor, the back of the tractor, and the drive axle components. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to take a look at the overall condition of the side of the tractor, make sure there's no signs of damage, make sure there's no signs of leaks underneath. Then I'm going to go into the individual components. I've got my mirrors, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, clear, and free of cracks. I've got my turn signal, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is a clean amber colored lens, reflective and functional. I've got my door, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My door seals, I've got one here on the door, and I've got one here around the opening of the door. Both of them are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. I've got my door latches, both the one on the door and the one on the tractor. They're both properly mounted, not damaged, and they're functional. I've got my steps, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, free of debris, able to support my weight. Underneath my steps, I've got my frame rail behind the battery box, which is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. I've got my batteries here, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. I'm checking all my connections to make sure there's no excessive corrosion and all my connections are in place. Underneath my battery box, I've got my air tanks, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. And I've got my air tank drain cables. I've got 2 on this side. They're properly mounted, not damaged. And I've got 2 on the other side over here. They're properly mounted, not damaged. I would make sure to drain excess moisture daily. I've got my DEF tank, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. My cap and seal are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions in the seal. Next, I've got my inspection sticker, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's clean, current, and legible. My IFTA sticker is properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean, current, and legible. That's it for the side of the tractor. Now we're going to go on to the back of the tractor. All right, so now we're going to move on to the back of the tractor. First thing I want to do is take a look at the overall condition, make sure there's no signs of damage, make sure there's no signs of leaks. Then I can go into the individual components. At the top corners of my tractor, I've got my reflective tape. It's properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean, free of debris, and it's reflective. I've got my fuel tanks, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. My fuel tank cap and seal are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions in the seal. Got my fuel tank straps and rubber spacers. They're properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. There's no signs of shifting, wear, or metal-to-metal contact between the straps and the tank. I've got my catwalk and my steps are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, free of debris, and they're able to support my weight. I've got my frame rail and my cross members are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. I've got my drive shaft, which is properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my exhaust, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. Sign of a leak would be soot at the joints and unions. Inside my frame here, I've got my in-frame electrical and air lines. They're properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking, and there's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. So next I'm going to go into my drive axle components. First thing I want to do is take a look and make sure there's no signs of obvious damage or leaks. Then I'm going to go into the individual components. I've got my drive axle torque arm, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My suspension spring mount, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My suspension springs, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My U-bolts, which are properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my shock absorber, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. It is oil filled. I've got my airbags, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. I've got my airbag mounts. Well, there's one on top and one on top of the airbag. They're properly mounted, not damaged. Then I'm going to go into my braking components. I've got my brake airlines, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. I've got my brake chamber, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. I've got my brake disc, which is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cracks. I've got my brake pad linings, which are properly mounted, not damaged. I cannot see the linings, but I know that I need to have at least a 1/4 inch of pad remaining, and it's something that I can ask about when I get the truck serviced. I've got my axle seals, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. A sign of a leak would be oil on the brake rotors, as well as the braking components. From there, I'm going to go into my tires. My tires are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, abrasions, or bulges in the sidewalls. My bud wheel spacing is properly mounted, not damaged. I've got proper gap. There's no rocks or foreign debris in between my tires. I've got at least 2/32 of tread in all major grooves, and I've got even wear across the face of the tires. My tires are inflated to the manufacturer's specification as listed on the tire, and it can be checked at the valve stem with a tire gauge. So when I've got bud tires, I've got 2 valve stems. I've got 1 valve stem here for the outer tire, and I've got another valve stem on the inside there for the inner tire. My rims are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. My lug nuts are properly mounted, not damaged. They're all present, no signs of a loose lug nut. Sign of a loose lug nut will be rust streaking from behind the lug nut or shiny metal on the threads of the lug itself. My hub oil seal is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. A sign of a leak would be oil pooling at the base of the rim or oil streaking across the face of the rim. All right, at the back of the tractor, I've got my mud flap bracket, which is properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my mud flap, which is properly mounted, not damaged. I have my reflective tape, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean and free of debris. I've got my brake lights, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, red-colored lenses, reflective and functional. And I've got my reverse light, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is a clean, clear-colored lens, reflective and functional. That's it for the back of the tractor, and that completes section B. So next we're going to move on to section C, the trailer. I'm going to start at the front of the trailer. I'm looking at the overall condition of the front of the trailer. I'm looking for signs of bulging, holes, or missing rivets. I don't see any, so now I'm going to go into the individual components. At the top, I've got my clearance light. It's properly mounted, not damaged. It's a clean, amber-colored lens, reflective and functional. I've got my trailer inspection sticker, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's clean, current, and legible. My trailer registration is properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean, it is current, and it is legible, as verified here. All right, now I'm going to move on to the side of the trailer. So now I'm on the side of the trailer. I'm looking at the overall condition. I'm making sure there's no signs of damage, holes, bulges, missing rivets. Now I'm going to go into the individual components. At the top, I've got my top rail. It is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. I'm looking at the trailer skin, making sure there's no holes, bulges, or missing rivets. I'm taking a look at the tape across the bottom, my DOT tape, making sure it's properly mounted, not damaged, making sure it's clean, free of debris, and it covers at least 50% of the trailer. Looking at the bottom frame here, it's properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds, as well as my cross members, making sure there's properly mounted, not damaged, no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. I've got my landing gear legs here. They consist of my landing gear crank handle, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My legs themselves, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My landing gear pads, which are properly mounted, not damaged, as well as my bracing, which is properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my skirt, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My turn signal is properly mounted, not damaged. It's a clean amber-colored lens, reflective and functional. Taking a look at the back here, make sure that my trailer skirt supports are properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my ABS light, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is a clean amber-colored lens, reflective and functional. And I have my corner marker light, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is a clean red-colored lens, reflective and functional. That's it for the side of the trailer. Now we're going to work on the tandems. So first thing I like to do is make sure that my air lines and electrical are properly mounted, not damaged. Make sure that there's no cuts, cracks, abrasions, and that they're at least 18 inches off the ground. Next, I'm going to move on to my tandem release handle. It's properly mounted, not damaged. It's clean, free of obstruction, in the locked position, and my pins are in place. Next, I'm going to crawl up underneath there and talk about some more of the components. All right, so now that I'm under the trailer, I'm going to take a look at my air tank, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It's not leaking. I've got my brake hoses, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. I've got my brake chambers, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're not leaking. I've got my suspension spring mounts, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My trailer torsion arm, which is properly mounted, not damaged. My spring leafs, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My U-bolts, which are properly mounted, not damaged. My brake rotor, which is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cracks. My brake, this is disc brakes. My brake pads are properly mounted, not damaged. I can't see the pads themselves. I know that I need to have at least a 1/4 inch of pad remaining, and that's something that I can inquire about when the trailer gets serviced. My axle seal is going to be in this area. It's properly mounted, not damaged. No signs of a leak. A sign of a leak would be oil on the brake rotors, as well as the other components in here. All right, next I'm looking at my bud wheels. They're properly mounted, not damaged. I've got proper spacing with no rocks or foreign debris in between the tires. I'm looking at the tires themselves, making sure there's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions in the sidewalls. I've got at least 2 30-seconds of tread in all major grooves, and I've got even wear across the faces of the tire. Tires are inflated to the manufacturer's specification as listed on the tire, which is right here, and that can be checked at the valve stems with tire gauges. Next is my rims, which are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds. I've got all my lug nuts are present. They're properly mounted, not damaged. There's no sign of a loose lug nut. Sign of a loose lug nut would be rust streaking from behind the lug nut or shiny metal on the threads of the lug itself. Got my hub oil seal, which is properly mounted, not damaged. No signs of leaks. Sign of a leak would be oil pooling at the base of the rim or oil streaking across the face of the rim. Next, I'm going to move to the back of the tandems. So I've got my mud flap, which is properly mounted, not damaged, and my mud flap bracket, which is properly mounted, not damaged. That's it for the tandem assembly. Now we're going to be moving to the back of the trailer. So now I'm at the back of the trailer. I'm going to start with the overall condition. I'm looking to make sure there's no holes, bulges, the hinges are in good shape. Now I'm going to go into the individual components. I've got my clearance lights across the top. They're properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, red-colored lenses, reflective and functional. My door hinges are properly mounted, not damaged. I'm looking at my reflective tape in the corners, as well as at the bottom of the door and across the ICC bumper. It's all properly mounted, not damaged. It's clean, free of dirt and debris. Across the DOT bumper, the ICC bumper, it needs to cover 100%. Got my turn signals, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, red-colored lenses, reflective and functional. Got my brake lights, which are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, red-colored lenses, reflective and functional. I've got my license plate light, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is a clean, clear-colored lens, reflective and functional. I've got my license plate, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean, current, and legible. I've got my ICC bumper itself, which is properly mounted, not damaged. Next, I'm going to go into my trailer door tieback. On this trailer, we've got a chain and we've got a slot in the side of the trailer. Most of ours have a loop as well as a hook. So we're going to call this the trailer door tieback, and the loop and the slot in the side is the trailer door tieback hook. On the side of the door here, I'm looking at my door seal. It is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, or abrasions. I'm looking at the roof of my trailer. My trailer is the roof is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no holes, cracks, or visible daylight. My trailer walls are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no holes, cracks, or visible daylight. And my trailer floor is properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean, free of debris, and able to support the weight of my load. We're going to talk about the difference between drum brakes and disc brakes in the event that you're testing on a vehicle with drum brakes. All right, now that I'm under the trailer, we're going to talk about drum brakes. First off, our brake chamber is going to be shaped a little bit differently. And on the back of the brake chamber, we've got a slack adjuster push rod, as well as a slack adjuster mechanism. We want to make sure that the slack adjuster and the slack adjuster mechanism are no less than 90 degrees with the brakes applied to make sure that they're adjusted in spec. Next, we've got our drum itself, and we've got our brake pad linings. On drum brakes, we can see the brake pad linings, and we need to make sure that there are at least a 1/4 inch of pad remaining. So next we're going to talk about the coupling components. Regardless of whether you get section A, B, C, or the entire tractor, you're going to be covering the coupling components. So I like to start with the airlines. I want to make sure the airlines and the electrical are properly mounted, not damaged. They're secure both at the tractor and at the trailer. They're properly mounted, not damaged. There's no cuts, cracks, abrasions. They're not leaking, and they're clear of the catwalk. Next, I'm going to go on to the coupling components underneath here. I've got my trailer apron, which is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no gaps or spaces between the apron and the plate. My fifth wheel plate is properly mounted, not damaged. It is properly greased. There's no gaps or spaces between the plate and the apron. And there's no cracks, holes, or illegal welds. I've got my tandem release arm, which is properly mounted, not damaged. It is clean, free of obstruction, and in the lock position. I've got my fifth wheel pedestal, which is properly mounted, not damaged. I've got my fifth wheel mounts and bolts, which are properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds, and all my bolts are secure and in place. Next, I want to take a look at my kingpin and my locking jaws. All right, now that I'm under the trailer, I'm taking a look at my locking jaws. They are properly mounted, not damaged. They're clean, free of debris, securely closed around the kingpin with no gaps or spaces. And I can see my kingpin. My kingpin is properly mounted, not damaged. There's no illegal holes, cracks, or welds, and it's securely fastened to the apron on the trailer. All right, so that completes the coupling components. Once again, regardless of whether you get Section A, Section B, or Section C, you're going to be completing the coupling components. Now we're going to complete the in-cab inspection. So first thing I want to do is make sure that my service brake I'm covering, make sure that my parking brakes are both applied. I'm in neutral. I'm going to turn the key to the on position. I can check to make sure that my ABS light on the trailer comes on and off. My engine, my seat belt, and my ABS light on the dash come on and off. And then I'm going to fire the engine up. All right, my engine light finally went off. We're going to continue. On the right-hand side of my steering wheel, I've got my gear selector. On my gear selector, I've got drive, neutral, and reverse. On my left side of the steering wheel, I've got my left turn signal, my right turn signal. I'm going to turn on my headlights, and I can see that my light indicator is on. I'm going to check to make sure that my high beam indicator is working as well. And my four-ways are working. All right, after all of that, I'm going to go into my mirrors. My mirrors are clean, free of cracks. They're adjusted to me, the driver. Got my windshield. My windshield is clean, free of cracks larger than a dime. There's no visual obstructions. I've got my windshield wipers. Those are functioning on all levels. And my windshield washer fluid. That's all functioning. I want to make sure that my defroster works. I can feel the air up there. And I'm going to make sure that my heater works. So I'm going to put it to the floor, make sure I can feel air moving down here. That's working as well. As soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to make sure to turn it off. That'll make things a little bit easier later. Next, I'm going to go into my gauges. I've got my tachometer. It's currently reading about 700 RPMs, and it's functioning. My oil gauge is currently reading about 50 PSI. Normal operating range is between 20 to 40 PSI. Right now this engine is cold, which is why it's reading a little bit higher. My fuel gauge is the white needle on this gauge. My fuel gauge is currently reading about 3/8, and it's functioning properly. My DEF is the blue needle on this gauge. It is currently reading full, and it is functioning properly. My speedometer is on the top right here. It reads in both miles per hour and kilometers per hour. It was functioning properly last time I drove this vehicle. Next, I'm going to talk about my air gauges. I have two needles on the same gauge. My white needle is my primary, as indicated by the white P here on the dash. Normal operating range is between 90 and 130 PSI. It is currently reading about 125 PSI. Next is my secondary gauge. My secondary gauge is the blue needle, as indicated by the blue S here on the dash. Normal operating range is 90 to 130 PSI. It's currently reading about 125 PSI. My water gauge is currently reading about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal operating range is 160 to 210. I've got my voltmeter. I'm going to go to the home menu in the dash, and on the top screen, I can see that it's reading 14.2 volts. Normal operating range is between 13 and 14.5 volts. I've got my seat belt. My seat belt both latches and unlatches, and there's no cuts, cracks, or frays in the seat belt, so that's functioning properly. I've got my horns. I've got my city horn, and I've got my air horn. Those are both functioning properly. Next, I'm going to go on to my safety equipment. In my side compartment, I've got my fire extinguisher. It is a 10-pound BC rated fire extinguisher. It is fully charged, securely mounted, and the pin is in place. I've got my 3 reflective triangles. They are clean, in good repair, and functional. I've got my spare fuses. They are behind this panel here in my fuse box. It is the whole top row of fuses. So now we're going to move on to the labs. So first thing I want to do, I left the engine running after performing the last safe start, but as we move on, I want to make sure that I perform another safe start. So I'm going to cover the service brake. I'm going to make sure both of my trailer brakes are applied. I'm still in neutral. going to turn the key back to the on position. If I had forgotten to check the ABS light prior, I can check it now. Once my gauges have cycled, I'm going to fire the engine back up, and I'm going to verify that I've got full tanks of air before I start. So right now I'm currently reading about 75 psi, so I'm going to raise my air pressure up. I'm going to apply a little bit of fuel so that my RPMs are about 1,000 RPMs. That's going to allow me to build up air pressure faster. For this test, I want to make sure my fan is off. That's why I mentioned it earlier. And I want to make sure that both of my windows are down. All right, so I heard my air governor kick out, indicating I've got full tanks. I'm verifying that I am between 120 to 130 psi. It's currently reading about 125. Next, I'm going to shut the engine off. I'm going to wait 3 to 5 seconds. Then I'm going to turn the key back to the on position so that my gauges are functioning. Once my gauges have finished cycling, I'm going to perform the leaks portion of this test. I'm releasing my tractor brake. I'm letting that stabilize. Once that's stabilized, I'm going to release my trailer brake and let that stabilize. All right, once that's stabilized, I'm going to press and hold the pedal, the service pedal, all the way to the floor and hold it there for 1 minute. Now, I want to use either my phone or a watch to verify that I have an entire minute. And over the course of that minute, I want to make sure that as a combination vehicle with the tractor and trailer, I don't lose more than 4 psi. Or if I was just the tractor itself, bobtail, I could not lose more than 3 psi. So everything's stabilized. I've started my 1 minute timer and I'm watching my needles and listening for leaks. All right, 1 minute has elapsed. I did not lose any PSI, so that is DOT compliant. If I had lost more than 4 PSI as a combination vehicle, this vehicle would be out of service for DOT non-compliance. Next, I'm going to perform the alarms portion of this test. This particular tractor has a feature that I need to reset the brakes before I continue. Most of our tractors do not. All right, so I've reset the brakes. I'm going to re-release my tractor brake, re-release my trailer brake, and now I'm going to fan down my brakes, pushing my service pedal all the way to the floor and all the way back out until my alarms come on. My alarms should come on prior to reaching 60 psi. It's currently at about 60 psi, so those are functioning properly. When I reset the brakes, I used a lot of air in the system, which is why it came on without me needing to fan the brakes. I'm going to continue to fan the brakes all the way in, all the way out until both of these buttons pop back out. They should pop out somewhere between 20 and 40 psi. So all the way to the floor, all the way out. Doing this nice and slow actually adjusts the brakes, if you have drum brakes, for the slack adjuster and slack adjuster push rod so that they stay within tolerance. All right, so both my trailer and my parking brake have popped out. I'm currently reading about 28 psi, which is between the 20 to 40 psi range, so that it worked properly. Next, I need to build up air pressure again, so I'm going to make sure I perform a safe start. Both of my brakes are applied. I'm still in neutral. I'm going to fire the engine up and build up air pressure again. And once again, to assist in building up air pressure, I'm bringing my RPMs up to 1,000. It's going to help build up air pressure faster. All right, so I heard the air governor indicating I've got full tanks. I can verify that I'm between 120 and 130 psi. It's currently at about 125 psi. Next, I'm going to perform the tugs portion of this test. First, I want to verify that the trailer brakes are holding. So I'm going to release the tractor brake. Once that's stabilized, I'm going to put the vehicle into drive, and I'm going to gently pull against the trailer to make sure that my trailer brakes are holding. All right, so my trailer brakes are holding. I'm going to reset my tractor brake. I'm going to release my trailer brake. Waiting for my trailer brake to stabilize. All right, so my trailer brake is stabilized. I'm going to put it back into drive. Now I'm going to be testing to make sure that the tractor brakes are holding. So I give it a little bit of fuel until I feel the vehicle start to cam over a little bit. I have verified that the tractor brakes are holding. Put it back into neutral. Now I'm going to make sure that both of my brakes are released. In my next portion, I'm testing the service brakes. So once those have stabilized, I'm going to put it into drive and I'm going to roll forward up to 5 miles per hour, or approximately 5 miles per hour, and lightly apply the service brakes. The vehicle should not pull to the left or the right. My service brakes should work, and I'm checking to make sure that my speedometer is working as well. So that's about 5 miles per hour. I'll lightly apply the service brake. All right. Vehicle came to a stop. My service brakes are working. Vehicle did not pull to the left or the right, and my speedometer was working. I'm going to set my brakes, put it back into neutral. I'm going to shut it off, and that completes my labs test. All right, well, that was it. The only thing that we did not cover today was the external light function test, which is a fairly simple process. You sit in the driver's seat, you activate the lights, and let the examiner know which ones you're activating. Hopefully you found this video useful in studying for your CDL test. So if you're interested in getting your CDL or working for the Varia family, please comment below.